today. Without wasting a time, I would like to hand over this mic to Professor BP Jadhav. Sir, सुरुवात करा.
Jadhav sir, please carry on.
Thank you very much, Principal Sir. Yes, good morning, listeners.
सर परत गेला सरांचा व्ह्यू
येतील 2 मिनिटं. मला असं वाटतं ते 300 किलोमीटर वर आहे, खूप लांब आहेत म्हणून तर प्रॉब्लेम येते.
नाही रेंज नाही सरांकडे.
नाही ना, सकाळी चांगलं ट्राय झालं, सगळं अर्धा तास बोललो आम्ही त्यांच्यावर. कसं बस खुर्चीवर कुठं बसायचं इतकं ठरलं सगळं अगदी.
सर आले पण आता चालू
ते परत आले.
अनम्युटेड. हॅलो
हा सर,
हो
आता
बोल ना,
तुम्ही-
तुझा आवाज येतोय मला.
हा, आता मोबाईलला तुम्ही जास्त हात लावू नका.
हो.
कुठं- हा, आता चालू करा तुम्ही.
अजिबात लावत.
हा,
ओके,
तुमचा
थँक
आम्हाला
यू.
आवाज ऐकू येतोय, दिसताय
हॅलो.
क्लिअर. प्लीज कॅरी ऑन. येस येस.
Okay. Hello, good morning, friends. Hello. Can you hear me properly? Hello. Can you hear me properly?
येस सर, येस.
Hello.
जाधव सर, त्यांचा आवाज तुम्हाला येणार
Yeah.
नाही.
Shall
चालू ठेवा. तुम्ही चालू ठेवा.
Okay. Shall we start the discussion of our today's topic?
येस सर.
Today's topic is related to British poetry. British poetry, if we consider the history of British poetry, we find that there are number of movements from time to time in the history of British poetry, and there are number of movements in the poetic history, and one of such movement is our today's topic, that is romanticism. Romanticism is the movement which started in 1798.
म्यूट झाले.
2 मिनिट मी फोन करतो.
तेवढा स्क्रीन. जाधव सर बोला.
जाधव सर तुम्ही बोलताना ना खाली टच करू देता असं वाटतंय. एक काम करा, इयरफोन आहे का? इयरफोन मागवा कोणाचा तरी. मग कसं काय होतंय मग असं? हेडफोन तर काही नाही, इयरफोन कुठे तुमच्या कानाला नाही ना. आहे? मग तू मोबाईल तुझ्या हातात आहे का? टच होऊन जातो येते. मग त्याला परत तुम्ही टच करून एकदा हे करा बरं. अनम्यूट केलंय तुम्ही सेल्फ बघा बरं. स्वतः म्यूट करू घेतले, त्याला अनम्यूट करा. एकदा टच करा, त्या स्पीकरच्या बटनाला टच करा आणि ती आडवी रेषा येते ना ती गेली पाहिजे. चालू ठेवा तुम्ही आणि माझी हा त्याला टच करा, एकदम बरोबर आहे. टच करा. हा 2 मिनिटं चालू ठेवा.
2 मिनिटं चालू ठेवा. 2 मिनिटं मला बघू द्या काय चालू ठेवा. 2 मिनिटं मला बघू द्या.
तुम्ही दिसतच नाहीत आता. जाधव सर बोला. जाधव सर बोला. जाधव सर बोला प्लीज.
Hello. Hello.
हा बोला.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you
हा,
hear
बस
me properly?
येस येस. हे आता तुम्ही चालू करा सर. आता बोलू. आता मोबाईल हात लावू नका. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Can-
Shall...
हा
Okay, okay, okay. So, friends, today we are going to discuss romantic poetry. This topic is related to British poetry. In the history of British poetry, there are so many movements, and of these movements, Romanticism is one. Romanticism started in 1798 and ended in 1835. During this period, the poetry composed was called as romantic poetry. Before we actually discuss the romantic poetry, the students of literature should try to understand one thing first. That if we want to understand and interpret any literary work, we must know the social, political, economical, and the historical background of that particular era so that we can interpret the literary work properly. Because the historical background, social background, economical background, political background, they affect lot on the different walks of life, and the literary writers, those who observe life minutely, react to that life, and that's why we must know the social historical background of the history. For example, today the entire world is affected because of the infection of COVID-19. In the years to come, after 50 years, after 100 years, when people will read about read about the poems written in this era, poems written today, short stories written today. If we want to interpret these poems and short stories, we must know the history of coronavirus, COVID-19. Then and then only we could understand the poems very well. We can interpret the poems very well. That's exactly what we need to understand the historical background of the Romantic poetry, which will help us to understand the rise of Romantic poetry. When we consider the historical background, we find that at the end of the 18th century, there were two important events took place in the history of the world. The first event was the independence of America, that is United States of America. And the second incident was the French Revolution. The second incident is important for us. The second incident, French Revolution, started in 1789 and continued for 10 years and ended in 1799. And it spread. It started in France. It started against the absolute monarchy and the feudal system of King John XVI, and spread not only in France but to the all corners of the world like COVID-19. It affected, it influenced all walks of life, and naturally, literary writers, they were also influenced by the French Revolution. The basic intention of French Revolution was liberty, equality, and fraternity. The people of France, they were harassed, tortured, troubled by the monarchy and the feudal system. Their economical condition was poor. The poor peasants, the middle class families from the urban life, they all were tortured, harassed, and against this spirit, the people of France revolted. Revolted against the tradition, revolted against the rule of unjust rule of King John XVI. And against this, the people revolted, and this revolt against tradition inspired the pioneers of Romantic poetry, and they also revolted against the tradition of poetry. The tradition of the poetry before Romantic movement was classical poetry. Classical age was dominated by the three giant poets, Dryden, Pope, and Johnson. These three giant poets, they were so dominant. They just they looked just like King John the 16th. Because Dryden, Pope, and Johnson, Dryden, Pope, and Johnson, these three giant poets, they actually changed poetry. They banned poetry. They restricted. They put on so many limitations because the three giants framed rules and regulations for composition of poetry. The new poets, they were forced to follow those rules only, and they were not allowed to go beyond that. They have to select the theme fixed by the three giants. They have to write in the style designed by the three giants. So in a way, the poetry was chained, the poetry was restricted, and therefore the poetry of the classic remained limited to the London city, its clubs, its cafe houses, and that's why it was prosy, boring, dull, and the Romantic movement, with the inspiration taken from the French Revolution, they started revolting against the classical age. The spirit of the classical age was revolted by these Romantic poets. The pioneer of this movement, they were William Blake, Robert Burns, and Walter Scott. William Blake, who started the movement by giving a roaring appeal by writing a poem, Tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, was a loud appeal by William Blake given to the new poets, and this appeal was upheld by number of poets like William Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge, P.B. Shelley, John Keats, Southey, and many other poets. But these are the major poets. Along with William Blake, Robert Burns also started the Romantic movement, and he also started singing like, my love is like a red, red rose. My love is like a red, red rose, blossomed early in June. My love is like a melody, sweetly played in tune. So this is the new spirit which started the Romantic poetry, and this is what we call as the rise of Romantic poetry. Now let us try to understand some of the important features of Romantic poetry. The first characteristic, the first feature of Romantic poetry is revolt against tradition. And as we discussed, that the Romantic poets, they denied, they refused to follow the rules and regulations laid down by Dryden, Pope, and Johnson. And that's why they refused to write on the theme selected by them. And these poets selected their own themes. They started writing in their own style. And that's why they revolted against the tradition of classical poetry and started to write a poetry. William Wordsworth's themes are different. Coleridge's themes are different. P.B. Shelley's themes are different. Their styles are totally different. And that was the beginning of writing a poetry in a different way, in a distinct manner. That was the revolt against the classical poetry.
जाधव सर,
Yes.
जाधव सर,
हा.
थोडं वेळेचं आपल्या सेशनला थोडं वेळेचं बंधन आहे. 3-4 मिनिटांनंतर सेशन संपणार आहे. परत आपला जो आयडी आहे, आयडी आणि पासवर्ड तोच टाकायचा आहे. नवीन सेशन चालू होईल. परत आपण क्लासमध्ये येऊ.
Is far better than human friendship because he says nature shares of our sorrows and doubles our joys, and that's how he showed his love, expressed his love for nature by writing a poem, Ode to the West Wind. Wind. Just imagine. We never think of writing anything about wind, but the poet P.B. Shelley wrote a wonderful ode to the west wind, and the west wind is